Okay, yeah, if we, does it look like we're going to be able to get her?
I'm happy to.
It's just she's on it. So Carla, one of the other things to mention about Carla is that she's actually running in the current election. She is a federal Liberal candidate who actually has a really good shot in her riding. And as you can imagine, at this point in the election process, she's kind of going from one event to another event. And so she has another interview in about 45 minutes. And so she's trying to fit us in now. She really wanted to be here, but couldn't, unfortunately, with that schedule. So we'll just give it a shot here. And if it doesn't come through, then we'll move right on. I just don't want you to get started.
No problem.
Okay, there we go. There we go. Hi, Carla. Okay, we're just trying to get you some sound now. All right. Do we have some sound for Carla?
I'm talking.
All right. Hi, Carla.
I'm talking. You guys can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you really well now.
Awesome.
So Carla, we've introduced you, and now if you wanted to just go right ahead and get started, we'd love to hear what you have to say.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you guys for having me here today. I'm a super fan of Athletes Can and the work Athletes Can has done and the huge difference that Athletes Can has made in the Canadian sports system. No short thank you, no short part due to Lori in particular. Lori, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's hard to hear you. You sound like you're in a bit of a toilet. Do I sound like I too am in a toilet?
Thankfully, you don't sound like you're in a toilet.
Okay, awesome. So let me start. So I've been asked today to talk a little bit about my journey from how I got from Team Canada wearing red and white, I guess, to how I got to Team Liberal wearing red and white. And the journey has definitely been an exciting one. And I can tell you all sitting here that one of the best decisions I ever made was to get involved with Athletes Can. There are some things you do in your life, you learn that you didn't realize the importance of them at the time, but for me, getting involved in Athletes Can was certainly a defining moment in the path of my professional, volunteer, and personal lives. So I don't know the background Lori shared with you. So I swam on the national swim team, and I swam in the Paralympics in '88 and '92, and I swam at World Championships in 1990. And when I retired, I went on to law school, and I fell in love with all things human rights. So human rights, inclusion, diversity, all those kind of concepts around equality. And then during my stay in law school, I got pulled in by one of Athletes Can's founders, Ann Peel, into volunteering with Athletes Can and actually being an athlete advocate on the Paralympic team in 1996. So Anne kind of introduced me to that world, and I ended up being on the board of Athletes Can, and it was really my introduction to nonprofit governance, to leadership, to athlete leadership, to being involved kind of behind the scenes in decision-making in sport, but also just in governance, in whatever your passion is. And it was a really safe place to cut my teeth in terms of learning about governance and leadership styles, testing my own leadership model, figuring out what worked, what didn't work. And it was quite a pivotal time for me in terms of my now ongoing passion for volunteering behind the scenes in sport and taking on these leadership roles. So I was on the board of Athletes Can for a number of years and ended up being an athlete advocate on a number of Paralympic and Commonwealth Games teams, including Melbourne and Manchester on the Commonwealth time, and I can't even count the Paralympics. I think like 7 more Paralympic Games. And what Athletes Can did in me is instill this notion of fair representation, working within the system to affect change, all of the things that I have now become really passionate about as I kind of, now that I'm old, mentor other people. So my path to where I am today, again, it started out in sport. So after Lori was a senior advisor to a sport minister. And I thought that was the coolest job ever. I have to tell you, I'd worked for the Human Rights Commission and I'd done all these really neat things. And I just thought Lori had the best job ever. And then Lori left that job, so I got that job. So I thought I had the best job ever. And what I did was I acted as an athlete voice for the Minister of the Sport who was Paul de Valera at the time, and I got to work on the Hill really within government. And that sparked another passion of mine, which is government. Now, I'd say politics, to be fair, but more importantly, kind of small p politics, and interestingly, government, how government works, how we can make change happen in government, legislation, all that really geeky stuff that as a lawyer, you admittedly kind of proudly like, but nobody outside your circles thinks it's cool whatsoever. And working, within the Canadian sports system and helping organizations pursue their objectives and really getting a lot of substantive stuff done when the Liberals were in government around sport was a real eye-opener for me in terms of what I wanted to do. And so I quickly decided that one day in my life I would run for MP and hopefully end up being a member of Parliament. So again, the athlete connection there, going from being at the board table of Athletes Can to being an athlete leader in the political sport scene. And then after that, my journey took me to a leadership position within the Canadian Paralympic movement. So I got on the board of the Canadian Paralympic Committee, and I ended up being president of the CPC during the Paralympic Games in 22. And as you guys can all imagine, as athletes, being an athlete in your hometown, being the president, was really a dream come true. It was one of the most exciting times of my life, and I've been lucky enough to have a lot of those. And it really, again, reminded me of how important strong leadership is and how important forging a path for others was, other athlete leaders. And then after I left the CPC, I got involved more at the international level with the IPC, and now I'm vice president of the Americas Paralympic Committee, which is 28 countries from around the Americas region. So on the Olympic side, you guys have PASO, and we have the APC on the Paralympic side. And just really involved, again, helping countries build their systems to be more inclusive, to be more, have more representation. We're working actually at the IPC level now on trying to figure out a better model for their athletes council. But it feels like everything that I've done kind of started with this phone call I got from Anne back in 1994, I think, or 1993, saying, we'd really like to have you involved with this. Do you want to come on board? And all these wonderful things have happened in my life since, because I said yes. Now I was asked this January by Justin Trudeau to run for the Liberals. And of course I said yes, and have embarked upon this journey of becoming the candidate, becoming, getting the nomination, becoming the candidate, running for election, being, not the minister's assistant, but being the candidate and somebody that people are always trying to get answers from and things from. And a lot of my early training on boards, starting with Athletes Can, really has prepared me for this role, because it is a crazy, crazy ride. I chose politics because I think that we need a better government. I think that we need a government that engages citizens, much like, the sports system is trying to engage athletes. It's really important that citizens have a voice, and I'm hopefully going to be that strong voice in my community. And hopefully I'll get to see some of you more often if I'm in Ottawa more often. But this has been an exceptionally awesome journey, and I can't believe I've got so many more adventures ahead of me. And, a pivotal point in my life, at a pivotal point when I just retired from my athlete career and was just, in law school and trying to figure out what's next, I happened upon, or Athletes Can happen upon me, and I've enjoyed the ride every single minute of the day. So, kudos to Athletes Can, suck up all this information that you can, because it will serve you well in the future. So thank you for having me. I don't know, are we going to go to questions, Laura?
I think we should go to questions,
okay,
since you're not going to be able to stay with us. So I'm just going to ask, does anyone have a question for Carla? While we have her before she heads off to her next. Okay, we have a question. Hold on.
Hi, Carla. My name is Jeremiah Brown. I was a rower in 2012. And my question is, what is the worst part of being in politics?
Oh, if your question is, which I think it was, what's the worst part of being in politics?
Yes.
Fundraising. Just like athletes, politicians have to go out and raise money for campaigns, and just like you have to go out and secure sponsorships. And it's a, I don't find the money side of this to be very fun whatsoever. I mean, I guess the petty interchanges that people have in politics is another thing, but I just don't engage in that, to tell you the truth. So if people take their shots, they take their shots. I'm an athlete. I'm focused on my goal. I'm not getting into the banter and stuff like that. But the fundraising part and I mean, having a political campaign is like starting a business. So you start your business, you find office space, you find staff, you have to find out how to pay those people. You have a product, which becomes you. You do a marketing plan, you do a business plan. It's very much a startup business. And the money side of it is something that I do not enjoy. So.
Oh. That's the time. Any other questions for Carla before we move on to Walter? We have one more question at the back. Oh.
Hi, Carla. Just a quick question. Looking back now, if you could go back to your younger self and with everything you experienced and learned now, what's one piece of advice you would give to that person just starting up in an athlete leadership role to really have an impact, or you know, something you've learned along the way that you wish you'd known earlier in that career?
That's a great question. I think one of the things I would advise my former self is to have a little more confidence in your own intuition. At the beginning of all this, I think I was a lot more deferential to people just because they had more experience or because they had certain titles. And I'm not saying to not be respectful, but I think having a little more confidence in myself earlier would have served me well, because a lot of times I wouldn't say something because maybe there was somebody more experienced in the room, or maybe I took some advice from somebody. So I would say, trust your gut, like trust your intuition. And I wish I had done that earlier in my career at various points, because I think I did miss some opportunities. Nothing huge, but I missed a little bit. So,
great question from Nathaniel. I think we're going to wrap that up for you, Carla, so that you can get on to your next gig. Thank you so much for being with us.
I wish I could see you. All I could see is the panel on the wall and somebody's thumb.
No.
Yeah. Hi there. But anyway, thanks all so much, and I wish you all the best in the rest of your forum, and hopefully I can join you next year. Maybe I'll be sport minister.
That would be fantastic. We wish you all the best. Woo!
Thank you. Okay, see you all later.
All right, so now we're going to move to Walter.
Thanks. I think I'm just going to stay seated so I don't hit my head on the lamp. Before I guess they've asked me to come in and speak a little bit today just about sort of my path and things that I've done. But before I do that, you know, I was sitting at the back during the last session, and I really noticed the questions that you had about that game plan program, right? And you know, I guess one of the things that I would want to convey too, as somebody who's kind of gone through several transitions from athlete into working life too, is to come here also and just express my concern also that I have for you guys, and I'd like to take this time a little bit to reassure you. There is something scary about transitioning from being an athlete into something else. It is different than other types of transitions that people go through. And so I'll talk a little bit about, I guess, sort of the pathway that I've gone through, but I would like to take a little bit of time to talk through my own transition, because I think that's relevant. And another point I'd like to make to Jeremiah as well is, as you guys think through this game plan program, I would recommend that you reach out, and I'm happy to facilitate it for you, to some other athlete associations from around the world that have already gone through this, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are some excellent programs out there. There's some not so good programs out there. And folks have worked very hard and gained a lot of experience and done the necessary research and figured out things that I think would be really beneficial as you develop it. Some of the questions, I could just tell, the questions that you guys were asking reflect, you know, your real and relevant concern. And the other thing I want to tell you too is that this is an issue, sort of career development, career transition, the stress around that is something that is shared by athletes right across the spectrum. So every sport, you know, athletes share that. So I guess, you know, obviously I'm quite tall. I played basketball. There's a statistic out there. I think that, you know, I'm American and I'm from the United States. There are, between the ages of 25 and 40, there's something like 87 foot tall people in the United States, and like 17% of them play in the NBA, right? So you talk about how difficult it is to become a professional athlete. Well, it is an advantage to be 7 feet tall and to play basketball. That is the truth. But the thing about it is as I reflect back kind of on my own path, when I was in the 8th grade, I tried out for the basketball team and I got cut. When I was in 9th grade, I was very relieved to have made the fall theater production, because then that meant that I didn't have to try out for the basketball team. But the coach kind of saw me with my big feet and he said, hey, just come and try out for the, just come to practice when the play is over. And that's kind of how I got started. Although I was always oriented towards being a student. I never thought about becoming a professional athlete. I never dreamt about becoming a professional athlete. I went to Dartmouth College, which was a school that was focused around academics. But I ended up 7 feet tall, and I could run and I could chew gum. And I ended up being drafted in the NBA in the 2nd round, and I played a couple of years. I played for the Utah Jazz. I played for the Dallas Mavericks. And then I played about another 9 or 10 years in Spain, in Italy, in France, and in Germany. I finished my career in Germany. My wife I met in college, in university, and we traveled together and kind of had that journey together and finished up having 3 children, all 3 of them born in Germany. At the end of my career, playing career, it wasn't elegant, graceful, sort of finishing at the top, actually, as I reflect about it. I was probably 32, 33, and I hurt my foot. I was playing for a team in Frankfurt, Germany, and I had a misdiagnosis. Doctor misdiagnosed something he thought was an inflammation. It turned out to be a tear, and I missed the entire season. And then I had some interest from some other teams, but it was extremely difficult to think about, my goodness, what am I going to do next? I had gone to university. I had studied history. I was a history major. It was a good college. I thought I'd had an education. I should be in pretty good shape. But the reality was that I found myself facing this at 32, 33, not knowing what was going to come next, and really wondering, doing that analysis. I heard some of you asking, what exactly are my skills? What is it that I can actually do? What can I bring to an employer? It's not just about being known in the community and being an athlete or whatever. It's actually, what is it that you can do? And if there's one thing that I can take from the talk that we just heard, is that she found her passion in life, right? She's doing something now that she's very excited about, and that's something that I think was a channel that or a journey that I had to go through, and all of you are going to have to go through if you want to be successful or to feel good about what you're doing. I didn't have the right answer when I was 32, 33. You know what I did? I scrambled around and tried to find another basketball job, and that's what I did. I found a job for $40,000, $50,000 in a lower division team in Germany, because I just didn't know what else I was going to do. When that job ended, when I was 35, I had the option of becoming a German citizen and continuing to play, or keeping my American citizenship. And I just realized, it's not going to work. I'm not going to make that kind of stuff. I had 3 children. I hadn't made millions during my career. I had some savings, but not a lot. And I went on unemployment. And I went into the unemployment office, and that's similar to some of these career counselors. You asked a very good question. Are they going to assess our skills and tell us, well, you should do this, or are they going to actually help us find a job, right? Well, the unemployment folks in Germany said, well, you can play basketball, which I was like, well, that's kind of why I'm here, right? Not to play basketball. Or maybe you could work in a warehouse, which was fine. I mean, I've worked construction, I worked in the library, I've done all those things. But it wasn't what I had gone, it wasn't my aspiration, it wasn't what I wanted to do. And so what ended up happening was I realized that I did have a passion for something, and that passion was, over the course of my career, there had been a growing sense of injustice for the way that I, as an individual, had been treated. I'd been an immigrant, right? I'd gone to a lot of these different countries. I didn't speak the language in a lot of places. And frankly, I wasn't treated very well a lot of the time. It actually probably rooted back, my passion for advocacy and for athletes' rights probably came back to when I was 17 years old. This may sound familiar to some of you. As an NCAA athlete, we went to our first practice in college, and 5 minutes before the first practice, the NCAA officer came down and said, okay, before we start practice, everybody sign these forms, right? And there's the coach, raring to go with his whistle, ready to start practice. And these are the NCAA documents they're like legal documents, right? You give away a lot of stuff when you sign on to the NCAA, and they were giving us 5 minutes. I mean, before practice, to just sign them. And we said, well, I don't know if anyone had ever done this, but I was like, well, can we read them? Would that be okay? And they're like, what? Well, can we ask a question, right, about it? And they didn't want to have any of that. They just wanted us to sign those documents. And I knew then at that point, that kind of something that I came back to, that happened a lot of times after that with different contracts and things that I signed, that there was something that was not quite right there. And so what I did then at that point in Germany was to start a union, to start a players association. And I got together with some of my friends, national team players, and we formed not an advocacy organization or an association, but a real union. And I'm going to talk more about that tomorrow. We talk about the collective issue because we have a session tomorrow that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about that more tomorrow. But that's what I did. We started a union. I recognized very early on that recreating the wheel was a very difficult challenge. Funding was a challenge, all of that. So I went out and went to a couple conferences in Brussels, and I met some other folks, and we created and founded, a Dutch guy and I founded a federation of player associations in Europe called EU Athletes, the European Elite Athletes Association, where we would bring representatives from player unions around Europe together to talk about issues like career development. That's one of the things that we would discuss. 30 seconds. And out of that organization, the professional soccer unions, the rugby unions, and the cricket unions had global federations where they would get together themselves. And they said, you know, what we're doing in Europe, in Brussels, is such a great thing. We're learning so much from each other. We need to do this on the global level. And so that was the next thing, was to bring those folks together to create a global sector for player associations called Uni World Athletes, which brings together about 100 player associations from around the world. The president is Don Fair, who's from the NHL Players Association, and the board is the NFLPA. We have some professional rugby from New Zealand, Japanese baseball, South African cricket, Swedish ice hockey. These are player unions, player associations from around the world to work on these issues, and that was where I worked as a director for several years. So that's kind of my career journey and a little bit of the transition. And so again, just to finalize, I sympathize, I'm concerned for all of you, I can sympathize for all of you. This is the type of organization that if it's done right and you guys are behind it, it is a vehicle through which you can solve some of these problems that you are facing, if it's done right. So yeah, with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Sprechen Sie Deutsch?
Ja, ja. Eine Frage? Hast du eine Frage oder nur kannst du sagen? Halb Deutsch, ja, okay. Und eine Frage auf Deutsch?
Any other questions? Yes.
I don't know if this is a personal question or not, but I'm just curious about when you
Sam Squash.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm just curious, so you went to the counselor and they're like, you should do this, and then you started something that sounds like it wouldn't have supported your dreams. I'm just curious if you did something else on the side too.
No, I didn't. So what happened was that there was some money from the government that you could get. It was an 18-month program that if you started a business, that you could get 2,000 euros a month for 18 months. And and also health insurance. That was another thing that was also really important. I had saved some money from my career, and we'd actually been quite careful, but when we did the math about whether we were going to live in the United States, it was a big life decision. We had 3 children, whether we were going to live in the United States or whether we should stay in Germany. We did the math. My wife wanted to work, and we realized that the cost of quality childcare in the United States, where we could have our 2, 3 small children there so my wife could work, it costs the same as our flights, our rent, our health insurance, and really, really high quality childcare in Germany. So we were like, well, we need to stay in Germany. So I was able to fund the first 18 months, just kind of the family with that funding. And then I used a little bit of seed money from my own savings to go and visit all the teams, to go and visit everyone, you know, get on the train and visit everybody, all the teams, and talk to everybody. And then that was all reimbursed through the dues that came in from the players. I was able to reimburse my travel costs from that. And that's how it started.
Yes, Adam at the back.
Adam Creek, rowing. I'm just curious, are you aware of any unions that represent Olympic athletes or athletes that are below, I suppose, the professional caliber of athletes of that nature?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am. So what's really key about this is, and this is a really interesting discussion that maybe we can get into tomorrow, is when we talk about Olympic athletes, actually many of the unions that are out there, so even the NBA Players Association, the NHLPA, those folks are, on the one hand, employees. They play in their professional leagues, but they're also playing for national teams. But there are some, I'm familiar with a Dutch association. Many of the rugby associations represent those athletes as well, not just to their clubs who are their employers, but also to their federations as national team athletes. And it's really a key thing, you know, as I was paying attention to the Athletes Can goals and, you know, partners and all of those things, you know, I'm looking forward to this. How try to sort through exactly what it is, because a union is about negotiating your work and social conditions. You know, you're working in social conditions, and the question is for you is this a job for you? Is this work? Does it need to be respected like that? And do you need an organization to represent you in those conditions, you know, in that way? So there's a lot of overlap, even in the very top player associations and player unions out there, between their employee status and also as Olympic athletes and national team athletes. A lot of good experiences out there that'd be easy to steer you to it.
I think tomorrow's session is going to be really wonderful to be able to further develop some of these ideas. Just to, I'm not going to go into mine too much. I am going to just summarize quickly so that we can try and get us closer to back on schedule. So I'm not sure if you can relate to this, but I'm not bossy. I have skills, leadership skills, understand? And I'm thinking that there's probably several people in the room, and whether you've been called assertive or bossy or some other term, some of that comes from just having a sense of, as both Carla and Walter spoke of, a sense of justice, or of seeing injustice and wanting to do something about it, and using just a particular talent or skill that you have to try to move things along. So that was certainly part of who I am and part of my skill set that took me in this direction. Back in the days before color, apparently, when I was on the national team, I told you it was a long time ago. Wasn't that great? Poofy. It wasn't natural. But one of the things about being an athlete at that time was that I wasn't really concerned about policies, and everything was going great. I wasn't injured. I was healthy. Everything was going great. And so I wasn't really worried about whether things were fair or unfair. I had a goal. And basically my goal was to pursue my sport dream, and I was also academically minded, and so I was going to university, but I actually quit university at one point, and I said, you know what, my brain's always going to be there, but my body in this shape isn't. And so I'm going to focus on, I want to be world champion in racquetball, and that was what I intended to do. But what happened along the way was it didn't quite go in a straight line. And so there was a national team selection that was the first time I experienced something that I thought wasn't fair. Like, I thought it was a pretty straight line. If you work hard and you perform, then you will achieve this goal. And then learned that it didn't always work out quite like that. And so it was a real awakening for me, and I became more actively involved as an athlete representative in my sport. And that led to all kinds of things. It led to my introduction to Athletes Can at the beginning of the association. It led to being part of other groups and organizations, and as well the inner workings of my NSO. I was then dealing with a really serious injury, and I had a bone grow through my medial collateral ligament in my right arm. And so my career was really coming to an end, and it was an injury that was typical of quarterbacks and baseball pitchers, but not of a female athlete. And so it was misdiagnosed for a long time. And it led to my switching hands for a while and then realizing that I really don't know if I can make it. I made it back to an open level because I really wanted to stay in my sport. That was my goal. But I was in the process of contemplating retirement, and at that time I was really becoming involved with Athletes Can. So I was on the board as a board member and really just chewing on all this stuff and learning and what it meant to be involved with others in planning agendas and working through whether we wanted evidence. We wanted to have good things to base decisions on. Well, we needed to get that evidence from other athletes. And so, you know, we were working on projects and we were doing all kinds of things. And at the same time, kind of concurrently, I was also working on my education. So I had been told, don't go into sport. It was in the 90s, there were cuts everywhere. And I was academically minded as well, and I had tried different things to try and fit with sport, and I finally ended up doing applied social science and then applying it, a lot of stuff to sport, so group leadership and dynamics and that kind of thing. And then the career path, kind of that whirly, it went in a lot of different directions. And so although I went from, the most natural fit was National Program Coordinator with Racquetball Canada. That was an easy one. That was where I lived. That was where my whole world was about that. So if I couldn't be the athlete who was going to be the world champion, I was going to support other athletes in being world champion. And I was going to support them through my volunteer work with Athletes Can and through my professional job. It was a really natural fit. From there, I ended up the Canadian Sports Centres, as they were called back then in the beginning. I was the first athlete services manager for the Atlantic Canadian Sports Centre. And again, I thought, wow, you know, we're going to be able to do all these great programs and services, and it was a partnership with the Canadian Olympic Committee, back then the Canadian Olympic Association, and Sport Canada and the Coaching Association, and the Canadian Paralympic Committee was sort of getting involved in them. And again, I thought, day to day, I'm going to support other athletes in their journey. If I can't achieve my dream, I'm going to help other athletes achieve their dream. So this felt really good. And by this point, I was the chair of Athletes Can, now the president. We had done a presentation in Parliament, and I'd met this MP at the time his name was Danny Coderre, and he had heard us speak. I was talking on behalf of athletes doing our thing. He then became Secretary of State, and right away I wanted to meet with him, let him know what our agenda was and what we cared about, and you know, what was this government going to do for us. And I invited him to speak at our forum. And about a week later, I get a call back from him, and I'm thinking, wow, I would have expected a call from a secretary or something. And so this is a kind of refers to what Carla said. He wasn't offering, yes, he was going to come to the forum, but what he really wanted to do at forum was announce me as a special advisor to the Secretary of State. And so I went from being the chair of Athletes Can to being on the inside of the federal minister responsible for sport and advocating our issues on a daily basis. And that was the dream job. When you've just been pushing for years and years to advocate on behalf of athletes, and then suddenly you've got the inner ear, and it was nonpartisan. So while Carla has chosen a particular, to run as a Liberal, I never became a card-carrying anything the whole time, because I thought as an advocate, to be really effective, I didn't want to have that affiliation. So I did that for 2 years, and we traveled the world, and we helped get the World Anti-Doping Agency and tried to ensure there was athlete focus there with the Athlete Committee, and tried to work on all kinds of things, and also got to know the inner workings of all the other organizations, and putting out fires, and renewing of the Canadian sport policy started during that time. So there was lots of things going on. And then what often happens is you just push too hard in too many directions, and I couldn't do it anymore. I just couldn't put out any more fires, and I took a real step back. And I went from that into moving back to where I was from, and becoming a provincial, getting involved at provincial level. I thought, you know what, this is all up here. I want to get back to grassroots. And so I got involved in, it was a bilateral, so an agreement between the federal government and the provincial government in New Brunswick, where they were going to, they were paying basically to create programs for sport participation. They exist all over Canada, and so it was go back to grassroots. Just let's stop trying to fix all the problems up here and go back to what's happening on a day-to-day basis, working with coaches and sport organizations and teachers and everybody else. And I did that for a while. And then I encountered another injustice that had nothing to do really with my job, but I used all my advocacy skills. They were recognized in policy work, and I ended up becoming a policy advisor in wellness. And so it was it kind of was making a leap, but it was using all my skills and all my education and everything. And I've been working as a policy analyst and a consultant with the wellness branch of the New Brunswick government for 8 years now. And it's taken me into the whole world of health promotion. I also saw that it was giving me tools, because sometimes when you work in sport, and we keep saying all these great things, how sport's going to solve all these problems, the people in health kind of look at you and they, well, no, you can't do all that. You're not going to solve all that. So I wanted to get into the inner workings of kind of the health promotion world and see what words are they using? What are their strategies? How can we better connect sport and health and recreation and physical activity and all these things and wellness? Having said that, I can't work for government full time because the machinery of government is kind of contradictory to being able to be nimble and entrepreneurial and innovative. And so I work for government on a part-time basis, and I negotiated that. It's very rare where I am to be able to work. I work 0.6. So I keep at least, so 0.6 is 3 days a week. And I keep part of my time so that I can do what I want with it. And so I use that to volunteer, and I use that on projects. I worked with Cause to co-write the Actively Engaging Girls and Women document addressing the psychosocial factors, and I do other writing, but it basically because I wanted to keep some of my time for the things I'm passionate about. It's also led to becoming a university instructor on health and wellness and health promotion strategies, and again, trying to convert people's thinking so they understand that you can be achieving excellence, so some of the transferable skills, that you can be supporting excellence and social progress at the same time. So when we're talking about these things and we're saying, there are still too many athletes who have dreams that are up here, but a life, kind of their quality of life is much lower than what they need and the support. So really excited when, wellness programs are coming out that are more supportive and recognizing transition. It wasn't there. We often say I Forrest Gumped my way through. But it's been that blend of taking theory and then applying it. So what are the frameworks that this is the way it should work, and then how does it really work? And I got to do that in Athletes Can. And as Carla said, she really sharpened her teeth with Athletes Can. Advocacy, different styles, and sometimes you have to be harsh, and it's really in someone's face, or it's using the media in a certain way. At another time, it's around partnering and really negotiating your way through something. And when do you use the velvet hammer is a term that's often used. So what technique works best when? And again, through Athletes Can, that was how I was able to develop those skills. Strategic thinking, solution seeking, using evidence to inform decisions. Really, that was powerful at this level when I was with Athletes Can, advocating as the chair, saying, we want this, well, why? Where's the proof? Right? And that came right back. So Dan Thompson at the back of the room is one of the founders of Athletes Can, and Ann Peel and Dan Thompson from the very beginning advocated that we needed to be able to tell the story effectively. You learn to collaborate, government relations, and as I said, teaching. So the lessons to learn, when I reflected on what do I have to share, everyone needs a car, but it's not this kind of car. It's actually comes from, so again, I'm using theory and applied theory, self-determination theory. If you think of car, you're on a journey, just remember, one way or another, you're going to be in a car at some point. And so C is competence. It's about recognizing that we all have strengths and abilities and assets and building on them and recognizing them in others. And so if I had known this earlier, I would have been able to apply it more intentionally. But I know it now and I'm sharing it. So you really want to recognize and own your own strengths, recognize and own them and share them and support them in others and build that capacity. A is for autonomy, so a voice. This is really around a collective voice, but it's about building our voices so that we do have choices and we're able to act on those choices. And it's really understanding, it's the whole role of making decisions on issues that matter to you and to others. And finally, R is for relatedness, and that's that sense of belonging. And that's one thing I did get through my whole career as an athlete. It was once I came to Athletes Can and like-minded athletes from diverse range of sports, but it was a sense of belonging with a common purpose. And so it's meaningful, and you basically support others just as they're supporting you. So it's this idea that it's reciprocated. And finally, our paths aren't always on a road. Our paths come in many different ways, and I would say it's important to have balance, really important to have balance. It's important to have resilience because life is the only thing about life that is sure is that it's not sure. It's unpredictable and you don't know what's coming. And so you may think that you have a long career ahead of you and something may happen, or you may think you're ready for retirement and actually you've just got a fresh breath and you're ready to go again. So resilience is the ability to bounce back and be durable. And so whether that's physically, emotionally, spiritually, we really need to build our endurance, our resilience. And finally, it's the ability to say yes, no, or maybe. That sometimes, yes, open yourself up to the opportunities and grasp them, because as my journey took me in lots of directions, I don't have any regret. it was actually my injury that opened all kinds of doors for me, even though at the time I thought it was the worst thing that could have happened. But the other side of that, the flip side of that, is knowing when to say no. And so knowing what opportunities are most meaningful for you and what will have the most impact, and you will figure it out as you go. So I think we've all taken advantage of opportunities. We all had different ways that we got there. And how we ended up becoming engaged on the systemic side wasn't a straightforward path. So I think that's the final lesson I would share with you. Any questions?